Hey everyone, Matt Pisarcik from RazorEmporium.com coming at you today for another series I love, Razor Archive. You can hear the echo in the museum we're entering right now. I'll give you the caveat I gave last time. If you were looking for a video all about shave performance or blade angles and gaps and synthetic versus badger hair, click this window out, just exit out now because that's not the path we are going down. We are putting on our thinking caps. We are taking a dip into the museum for just a few moments here and talking about the idiosyncrasies and small differences between razor models. And today's razor model has been one that I have, no joke, been researching for nearly a decade to make today's video. Almost 10 years of experience coming at you today. Ready? Ready? Here it comes. What are we talking about? The Gillette Techmatic razor. Now I know what you're saying. Matt, this isn't the Techmatic. The Techmatic was this weird black-handled band razor from the 60s that I see at the antique stores every time I go out. You're right. But that was 1967. This is 1947. This is the razor that you probably have never heard about. Or if you have, it's like a white elephant. Just you never see it. It's really, really rare. So I guess in our Razor Archive series, we have to go down the list. So when did it come out? It came out for a very, very, very brief period of time. Second quarter, 1947. That's when the actual models came out. Now this is not a retail model. Okay, we'll get into what this is. It's a prototype, but I don't have a Techmatic razor. I want one, and I bet a bunch of other collectors out there do, because I think I've seen 3 maybe ever pictures. I've held one at the P&G archives, but it is a 5 out of 5. 5 with flashing letters, numbers, even just the razor. Forget about the case. You'll have a 6 out of 5 if you have the case and everything, but it's probably the rarest Gillette razor ever because of when it came out and kind of failed. So almost everything that fails from a company usually is harder to find, right? But what is it? The year is 1922, 1923. Colonel Jacob Schick is on the front lines of World War I, and he is injecting a 308 round into a rifle with a magazine clip, and he's just able to put the clip in and advance the bolt, and he can semi-automatically load his rifle. He loves it. He leaves the services, he puts on his inventor cap, and he invents the Schick injector as we know it. That you know, the first ones obviously were the repeaters, and you put a little magazine in. They were magazine repeating razors, but the whole idea was this: that you're able to have your blades stored in something other than your hand or a pack, and there was something integral about that pack that allowed an injection of the blade onto your razor handle, and you could start shaving with that without having to touch the blade. No little nicks or cuts or delicate handling of a blade. That's it. That's the whole concept. Well, Schick was doing fantastic with it. They come on the scene in the late 20s, early 30s. They got their magazine repeaters. Then it turns into the Schick Razor Company, and you're doing more of this with a big key that goes in, a lot more reliable, a lot easier, and they're just doing a bang-up job. Well, I can tell you that Gillette never wanted to be behind the 8 ball. Even though they were the biggest name out there and they were doing great, they always wanted to be number 1 with a far, far distant number 2. And here comes Schick trying to come into their territory, and people are starting to like this idea of, you know, really quick, easy loading and throwing a new blade in. Well, and that's the real hang-up. When you don't have to touch the blade, when it's really fast and easy to change blades, you won't keep that old, dull, rusty blade in your Gillette razor. You're going to put a new one in. And that's what Gillette wanted. They're making the money off of the blades. They want you to change them more frequently. So anything to advance that is a good thing. I had the immense privilege and opportunity to go out to the Procter & Gamble Historical Archive Department in Cincinnati, Ohio, and look through original Gillette records. And my research is one of a kind. I am bragging a little bit because I'm pretty excited that I actually uncovered research into an idea for a Gillette injector razor. Started as far back as 1932. Gillette had the problem first, of how to get a razor past the center bar. All these razors have a center bar. Even the 3-piece razors have, bars that connect the handle to the head. How do you inject a blade? The injectors are neat because you put them in and it's just one side, and so you can just pass it on one side and the handle's on the other side. Well, you got a handle down the middle and you got a left side and right side. So how do you get a blade through here? You got to break the blade so that one end can open up and kind of go around the center bar. So I literally found little tiny blade breakers that were used to just snap open one side of the blade. Crazy, right? Well, pretty soon that concept turned into some kind of container to not only be a blade breaker, but a blade holder. And that really is the impetus of a dispenser. And so the dispenser actually comes off of the same kind of family tree of ideas of something that could hold these blades that were going to be used to be injected. But I think Gillette realized about in the mid-30s, late 30s, they couldn't break the blade and on one side and just inject it. It was better to get the center bar just out of the equation. Move the center bar away so it's not in the middle anymore, which is, how do you move that? And they actually came up with the grandfather of the toggle. They have a working prototype, and here's a picture of it, where you flick the bottom and it was able to move up and kind of facilitate a loading process, and you could flick it back down. And then they also had more like this, a conventional style, where you would twist it. This is a really brilliantly engineered idea. You would twist it, the bottom knob is spring-loaded, it pops out of the way, one side's completely open, so you can get blades in here, and it's actually only connected by this side. The side is connected through kind of an elaborate linkage assembly and some little springs inside, and then you have to basically hold down the cap and it threads. There's even, you can see threading all the way on the cap on these, it's crazy. And then you can pull it back down and get it all to be closed up like a butterfly razor again, right? Or really a 3-piece design. But this whole idea was to do this, right? You take your dispenser, you'd be able to go over here, and I'm not gonna do it, guys. Sorry, these blades are probably, I think there's only 1 or 2 left in here. So, and you would inject this on. You would slide this blade on and facilitate this loading process very quickly, very easily, and then you'd be able to, clamp it down and start your shave. Now, I mentioned a few minutes ago, this is a prototype. So this came out, and I know, to the day, it's got engraved on the bottom, August 22nd, 1945. I found other models like this at the P&G archives that were dated, late 45, 46. So they're still playing with this idea. These are very late model prototypes. You can tell from the pictures we showed earlier of how crude some of those were compared to this. This is like near production. I was lucky and honored and just randomly able to get this from somebody from a Canadian Gillette plant. I don't know how they got it. It's not my business. It was a Canadian collector. I got it from him. It's probably one of the most prized pieces of my collection that I have basically a working model. This is the kind of thing that the engineering department would show to executives, the CEO, the vice president of sales, whatever. You'd go in and you'd show them this in the office. You're not going to bring the crude prototypes that look like someone's shop class project. This is near refined enough to sell. Obviously, there's no branding on it. The underside just has the date of which it was made. That's it. And they kept track of that kind of stuff. Found a lot of stuff like this with little engraved numbers and digits. So another point we always like to make during the Razor Archive series is like mechanical flaws or kind of troublesome areas of how the design plays out. And because this is a razor that has all this crazy, differences with how it's going to load a blade, this entire head, if you take this bottom knob down, and you push the head down, it can actually just slide right off. And then it really reveals kind of more about the blade. You can see how it's going to hold a blade with just this one bar and then one little diamond that matches up with the cutout pattern of the standard Gillette double-edged blade that hasn't changed since 1931. And it only uses that one side to really register the blade, as we call it, or align it, which in today's standards is completely not enough, not sufficient. People talk about blade chatter and the blade able to be moved around. And I know that after all the design work on the rec stuff, that's really important to today's consumer. But this being only on one side, there's quite a lot of play that can be moved around. Now, once we add the head back on and we put the center bar up through, and once it's clamped in place, it gets a lot better. But it's just something interesting to note. And just the idea in general that this head can just kind of slide off like this is obviously very bizarre. We're used to 3-piece razors, but I can imagine another kind of downfall of this design. People may have had issues with this popping off. And if you're not very mechanically inclined, you may be confused how to put that back on, or maybe put it on backwards, and you can have issues. So that's a potential downfall of this design. But you got to think about what's happening at the time. You got Miracle on 34th Street coming out, Jackie Robinson's in the baseball, you know, World War II's just wrapping up, and you got this newfangled razor coming out trying to compete basically with Schick to get you to load blades faster. It made its debut as a commercial product, second quarter 1947. It was advertised pretty heavily. I mean, the price point, $10. $10! There's nothing out at this point, and for Gillette, there's $10. Their executive razor with the ostrich case that came out a year after this was a $10 razor. But before this, there wasn't really precedent for a $10 model. And I think it was just kind of cumbersome. Even though they tried this whole thing, they abandoned it. It failed. It didn't sell very well. There weren't a lot of them. The test market was Akron, Ohio. And so if you're in the Ohio area, if you find one, it's probably because they did a test market there. We have original papers showing, the test market idea and where they were going with this. But didn't do well. But you think of all the beautiful things it did spawn. It literally was like the grandfather of so many things for Gillette. First off, it spawned the idea of a dispenser, which they immediately capitalized on in 1946, 1947 with the super speed. And the whole point of that razor, quick loading. So instead of trying to avoid the center bar like the Techmatic does and move it out of the way or do something clever, they just said, nope, we're going to embrace the center bar and we're going to hook it and just drop it right in and close the doors. So they played in with the butterfly idea and then came up with a perfect mate for it, the dispenser. The other thing that spawned was a toggle. Now it took another almost decade to really realize that with 1955, 1956 toggle prototypes. But this whole idea of a flicking mechanism that allowed for some kind of opening or some kind of mechanical change came out of the Techmatic. It also did spawn the iteration of one of the transitions to cartridge razors 20 years later with the banned Techmatic razor. It uses the same name as this, but it was again trying to make a connection between your blades and your razor. And why, guys? Let's get to real simple here. Really, really simple. You could go to a million different people to buy blades. There was Dawn 1 and, there's so many different blades in the market. But only Gillette was making high quality handles. This is a loss leader. This is the profit center. By forming it in some kind of container dispenser that linked the two, that made the two a married couple, was the beginning of cartridge razors. When you no longer have tons of third-party choices for your blades, but instead your handle and your blades are kind of a system. And that's what Procter & Gamble calls it, a system razor. So they actually see this 1947 Techmatic as the beginning of the system razor. And if you go back in time, Schick was really, really, doing it with the injector, not all the way back in 1922. But it took till, 67 with the banned Techmatic razor to really, bring the system to life. And that's where Gillette went with the whole razor idea in general. They got away from double edge because they couldn't be a system. It was too open source. And so we always ask ourselves, why did Gillette stop making double edge razors? Maybe someday they'll turn on their machines again and make fat boys, guys. It's never going to happen because of this razor. This was the beginning of the end. This is the grandfather system razor, the Techmatic. I've been wanting to make this video for 10 years. I am so excited to be able to share all these crazy weird details, all these turns and spins with you guys. If you have a Techmatic for sale, let me know. I want to buy it because I've always wanted one in my collection. Having a prototype is equally as pretty cool, but I would love to have the actual presentation case. I know a couple of my buddies out there have one, and I'm extremely jealous. But if you've heard about the Techmatic, if you know some detail I don't know, if you thought you saw one in the wild, let me know. I guess we'll finish it on some of the things we always say in the Razor Archive videos. You know, we said the rarity. We're going to say 5 plus. Extreme, probably the rarest Gillette razor ever. In terms of durability or mechanical problems, hey, Gillette abandoned this whole idea because of kind of a goofy mechanism of having to get the center bar out of the way. There's a spring in here. This thing's spring loaded. It requires a special kind of dispenser that is never obviously on the market anymore. So it's going to be hard to put a normal double-edged blade on here. Let's see if I can reach over and grab a double-edged blade and do it just for posterity's sake. I'm just kind of curious to see how hard it is. I won't use one of the nice ones, but we'll use one here. Let's see if I can do this. Okay. So if I'm pretty careful about it, I can load a blade. I guess that's what we really need to do. We need to do a shave with this. The rarest shave in the world. That's what another video coming out next, right? But I could do it. So I guess you don't need the dispenser. If you just carefully mechanically load it, you'll be good to go. Getting it out may be a different story. A little difficult. There we go. To get it out. Okay, so a little bit of care, you can get past the mechanics. If it happens to break or has some issue, I would have no idea how to even take this apart to begin with. I don't see any entry point like I normally do on a Fat Boy or Super Speed of how do I even begin by taking this apart. So maybe difficult to service. So, but it definitely belongs in a museum, so to speak. You will not find these anytime you're out at an antique store, unless maybe if you're in Akron, Ohio, maybe you will. So the Techmatic, the rarest Gillette razor ever. I'm so happy to share this with you guys. Leave a comment below if you also think it's the rarest. If not, what is the rarest Gillette razor? I want to know. I want to own it. That's all I got. If you do leave a comment, you're interested to win one of these, the Razor Emporium black and blue t-shirt. Thank you so much. Please like this video, share it with all of your disbelievers and haters and lovers of Gillette razors out there, because I want to really stick it to them that we know all about the history of this guy. And we'll see you next time at Razor Emporium for all things vintage shaving. Thanks, guys.